One of the most urgent tasks for our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO₂ to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and welcome to the Climate Realism Show. There's nothing like it on the air, and we appreciate your patience in waiting for us to get launched. I have to tell you, we're running on, I guess the right way to say this is we're running on emergency backup power, technically anyway. We've had some real hiccups here. Our normal host, Jim, is out on vacation, and we were all set up for that. But unfortunately, somehow our producer, Andy, we can't reach him. We don't know if it's a technical problem or something else. And so we're doing our very best with Linnea's help, who has access into the producing channel, to try to, basically just get this show on the air. Now, I got to tell you, I've spent decades in live television and radio, and live television and radio is full of pitfalls, and this is exactly like that. So we're going to do our best to get through the show and keep you entertained and show you what we hope to be able to show you. But please be patient if we can't respond to questions or we have some technical hiccups or glitches that occur because, that's just the way it goes sometimes in live television. So with that, I'm going to introduce our usual and not so usual panel. We have, of course, Linnea Lueken, who's doing double duty today as emergency producer as well as commentator. And we have Sterling Burnett, who's director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center, who is in Texas and praying for us as we speak. And we have Chris Martz, newly minted meteorologist, who is going to help us comment on some of the crazy things that have been going on with climate this week and some of the things about the nastiness associated with the new NAS panel that's coming out, trying to shoot down the EPA's reduction of the endangerment findings. So we got a full show, and let's just hope that everything goes as well as it can possibly go. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and let's just get going. First thing I want to do is thank our streaming partners, which is junkscience.com, CFAC, what's up with that? Well, sort of, I'll explain later. The CO₂ Coalition and Heartland, UK, Europe. Let's get started. So, we want to welcome all of you to our show, and thank you. Yeah, feel free to comment in comments on the YouTube channel or Rumba channel or whatever, and we'll try our best to answer those things for you. But I do want to make a point. My website, What's Up With That, is currently down this week. Many of you may have noticed this. We've got a maintenance message, which is up and running. And the reason for that is that we're trying to convert to a new, faster, better system. And of course, you know what they say, when it rains, it pours. And so I don't even have that running today. But what we are doing is working in the background, trying to get 18 years worth of content moved over to a new system. That's over 35,000 posts and 4 million comments. And so it's an 18-year-long freight train that we're trying to migrate. So please be patient about that. There's nothing wrong. Okay. Funny thing, Steve Malloy, a regular guest here, commented the other day that I should just take and make a giant zip file of everything we've done on What's Up With That for the past 18 years and submit it to the EPA public comment section. Well, if we did that, we'd probably crash their system, but, it is what it is. Okay, so let's get started with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Linnea.
All right, let me get that.
Thank you, Bill Nye, for being reliably loony. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is we've got kind of a special bonus crazy climate news of the week. This is from Portland, and I don't know if you can get this up, Linnea, but it's from KOIN. There it is. Thank you. Get this. The high temperature in Portland today is forecast to be 88 degrees, almost 90. Oh, the horror. Well, guess what? The school system says, we need to make it like a snow day. And so we're going to close school because of 90 degrees. Oh, the horror. Chris, you deal with this stuff on a daily basis over on Twitter, where you shoot down these kinds of lunatic, crazy things that some of these organizations do. What do you have to say about this?
So I assume this is for today's news. Well, Portland's record high for today was 95 degrees set in 1944, and the record for yesterday was 102 set in 1967. So these people are just a bunch of wussies. Come on, man. I mean, I've been to.
I suspect they didn't close the schools in '67, or
they didn't have air conditioning then, right?
Well, yeah, and they didn't. Back in the 1930s, 1939 was a pretty hot year out there. They didn't have an AC, and yet they went to school.
They had a one-room schoolhouse, and kids were forced. They wore heavy woolen clothes, and they bucked it up and went to school.
Yep.
And here in Texas, by the way, it is warmer in Oregon than it is in Texas. We are well below our normal average. It's 76 at the moment where I live. Normal average would be in the low 90s. My pool looks like it's going to close early.
The Capitol Weather Gang actually called an official end to summer yesterday in D.C., the earliest call they've ever made, apparently.
Yeah, like they have control over the whole, astronomical things that, create meteorological summer.
Even down where I am in an undisclosed location in the South right now, it's not been that hot either. I don't think we've even hit 80 the last 3 days in a row, which is incredible for this time of year. So,
yeah.
In fact, the cold pattern is expected to continue. I took a look at the models this morning and some of the ensemble suites on Ryan Malley's weathermodels.com, and it's just the cold plumes, cold air masses keep coming down and down and down over the next 2 weeks. And we're seeing temperature departures potentially up to 20, 25 degrees below average coming into the U.S. For September. And if this were, say, January or February, this would be a historic Arctic outbreak, potentially rivaling some of those big ones that we've seen back, 100 years ago in terms of the intensity. So this kind of cool pattern coming up here is interesting, but don't expect it to get a lot of news coverage. It doesn't suit the hysterical storyline that they want to adhere to.
Yeah, we're 16 to 18 degrees below average today.
Yeah. And, you pointed out, Chris, that wusses is the word, and we've seen this time and again, not just with heat, but with snow or, any kind of a threat, it seems that the school systems now just don't have any backbone whatsoever. And they're worried, that something may happen. Well, that may happen any day, but they're taking this super overabundance of caution lately. And, turning our students into a whole generation of weather wusses.
Do you think that's what they're doing, though, in Oregon? Or do you think that basically the NEA there, the school system, the administrators, they bought into the climate scare story and they want to promote it more by saying they're facing extreme heat and we need to shut the schools or the kids are in danger? I don't really believe they think kids are in danger. I think it's just maybe they want rather than a snow day, they want a heat day off or something.
Yeah, well, it is coincidentally right before the 3-day weekend. So maybe those officials just thought, you know what, we could get an early start on our trip to the coast or a trip to the mountains if we just cancel school because of this heat wave that's coming, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's move on to our next crazy climate thing. This one is from William Briggs, statistician to the stars, as he calls himself, on his website. And his title is, and get this is hilarious, Deniers are refusing to die from climate change heat waves. Oh, no. Yes, he writes, The lurid headline, a heat wave likely, and that's the key word, likely killed 263 people in London, study estimates. This is the study that came out in July about the late June heat wave in the UK. And so he writes that the heat wave was a small increase in daily temperatures experienced in the UK at the end of June and beginning of July. And there's this graphic that they have, where you can see this is your typical, climate alarm graphic that shows up these days, where we have red hot temperatures all over the map. Instead of a few years ago, you look at this stuff and it's in the greens. Excuse me. So people get freaked out when they see maps like this because, the color brings in alarm. And so this study basically said that, there's all these people that likely would have died. And they give you this graph that says London would have seen many fewer deaths in a world without climate change. It's an estimated deaths per day graph. And basically they're saying that the number of expected deaths per day in this graph on Briggs' website likely doubled because of climate change. Yeah, there it is.
Well, based on the headline, I think DJ Bo is onto something. If you just had more deniers over there, there'd be fewer people dying. Don't believe, it's like voodoo. If you don't believe in it, it has no impact on you. What they also aren't showing, of course, is how many deaths are not occurring in London in the winter because it's not as warm there. And so you're suffering fewer winter deaths, which is a far greater number. Not just in England, but everywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point Sterling made. And, the number of cold weather related deaths outweigh heat related deaths globally by a factor of about 9.4. And that's over, a study that was done over a 20-year period of they looked at 20 years of mortality rates. And another thing is that fewer people today die from extreme heat than ever before. I mean, the 1936 heat wave, if I recall correctly, in the United States killed 5,000 people. They didn't have AC back then. They didn't have, ready ice over at the 7-Eleven to go get. So they didn't have the strategies that we have today to deal with extreme heat. I always see it, places like the UK, much of Europe, they're not necessarily used to having, temperatures, like this. It doesn't happen all the time. And they don't have obviously AC or stuff over there, but, perhaps they should probably try investing in infrastructure that allows them to put AC in and stop living in the 1930s.
Well, I mean, you can't speak as Europe like that as a universal. The whole Mediterranean region.
Oh, yeah, Mediterranean. Yeah.
Greece, sure. Italy, Spain. Look, they're hot. I'm sorry. Every summer, they're hot.
UK, not so much, but a lot of the rest of the Mediterranean part of Europe, yeah, for sure, they do get hot. I mean, you can go back and find heat waves. Like look at 1911 or 1947 or 1943. There were 44. There were big heat waves. A lot of the big ones were in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. So they've had these things, throughout history. They should learn how to, prepare for it in some places.
Yeah, now here's the fun part. So we have this study that predicts and expects, and it's a typical climate model thing, the graph that you see here is fantasy. It's about expectation due to climate change. But when you go and look at the actual data that they measured, looking at they report deaths in London during the summer. And if we scroll down, you'll see it. There it is. No, wait, that's not it. The next one down, further down. There it is. Here it is, going from July through all the way into August. And that little vertical line right there, those double vertical lines, those are the actual deaths that occurred in London during the heat wave. What? Yeah, it just goes to show that these attribution studies based on climate models are absolute hokum.
Was this study done by the World Weather Attribution?
Yeah, I think so.
Of course.
Well, even the idea that temperatures have been unusually warm there may be a little suspect because of all the stuff you find out about the Met Office, screwing around with reporting temperatures from non-existent stations that are breaking records. It's pretty clear the Met Office has been fudging the numbers for some time now. So we can't even be sure that, any unusually high temperatures are being recorded. It may just be a matter for the public of what's it called? I can't remember, but it's, basically they're believing the hype, and so it's affecting them psychologically.
There's another thing I want to point out, and that the last few summers, there's been some
climate Stockholm syndrome.
In the last few summers, there's been some incredible, by historical standards, heat waves in parts of Europe. But the thing is that kind of stuff can happen due to internal variability alone. Look at the Pacific Northwest heat wave of 2021. I mean, it got hot up there. All-time records were shattered up in the Pacific Northwest. But then what happened then was the equivalent of what really happened in the rest of the United States and Canada in 1934 and 1936, and some of the other heat waves that we had. Other parts of Europe, like I think Finland and Sweden, 1933, there was the big heat wave there. So when you have these really extreme events like that, that's just part of the fact that you have two turbulent fluids. You have an ocean and atmosphere, and how they interact. They're going to produce all sorts of crazy things with internal variability alone. So you cannot attribute that to climate change, because by these event attribution studies, which are pseudoscience, by their logic, the 1936 heat wave and across the U.S. couldn't have happened without climate change. So all sorts of extreme events are going to happen. And kind of what's happening in the UK, in Europe right now, is sort of what happened in the U.S. during the 1930s. There's nothing to do with climate change.
The only way to attribute any of these things to climate change is if there's a long-term sustained trend in these things occurring.
Well, even if that's the case, that doesn't tell you what caused it.
No, but you could say climate change. It doesn't. You're right. It doesn't say you can't attribute the cause. The attribution, world weather's attribution part is what's really suspect, because they come at it. It's a logical fallacy. They're affirming the consequent. They assume climate change is causing something, and then they go about telling you how much of they either increase the chances this particular event occurred, or how much more severe climate change made it. But they've already assumed that climate change is causing it is built in.
Well, it's circular reasoning from the outset, just like, the climate models that show, CO₂ causes warming, so the models can't ever get in balance. So they force the models to get the energy flows in balance. They add CO₂, it shows warming. Well, they say, CO₂ shows warming. Well, it's just circular reasoning. Same thing with these event attribution studies. And the other problem with these attribution studies is that the actual architect of them, this European scientist, I don't know what nationality, but she said that these studies were intended. She told Politico that they were intended with lawsuits against oil companies in mind. So when you have that as the goal of what you're trying to do, that automatically disqualifies it from being actual, objective, dispassionate science.
I could be wrong, but I think Frederica Otto is the head of world weather attribution, and I think she's going to be hosting the IPCC. Is going to be in charge of the new IPCC report. So they have said for years, WWA has said for years, IPCC is way too cautious. They're not willing to attribute these things to climate change. And so who do they put in charge of the next report? The woman that's in charge of doing attribution based on phony science.
Yep. I saw that too. And I was getting ready to actually, go into that segue there. And that's an important point that you made, because the IPCC has definitely lost a lot of credibility after its first two reports, especially with the 2001 report. And and the hockey stick graph, and getting rid of the medieval warm period, and obviously the IPCC was created for before they had the policy goal, the policy cart in front of the scientific course, even with the first assessment report. But I've always found their chapters on extreme weather events to be fairly reasonable from a scientific standpoint. And if they actually follow through with this, with AR7 and doing the event attribution stuff, they're going to lose any shred of credibility they have left. And I hope that doesn't happen.
Yep.
So I want to point out one of the biggest problems with these attribution studies and with climate science in general is that they tend to think of everything linearly. You know, carbon dioxide goes up, temperature goes up. That's all they talk about. But the bottom line is that we live in a chaotic system. The climate system of the world, the weather system of the world is entirely chaotic. And, you know, you've probably heard about the butterfly effect, that famous book. And so we end up with these folks that think of things linearly when chaos is the norm, you know. Absolutely. And so these wide swings in temperature, wide swings in storm intensity, all this kind of stuff is absolutely normal for a chaotic system. And they completely ignore that. And that's the whole danger of this thing. They push out to people this idea that we are living in end times because of climate change, when it's absolutely false.
Yep.
I wanted to point out as well that the other day on Twitter, I think it might have been yesterday, X, sorry, Briggs himself pointed out that the easiest way to do data analysis is to start with your conclusion. So I think that world weather attribution really gets that, and they've done a good job promoting that concept.
I'm just appalled.
The other thing that you need to look at. Go ahead, Sterling.
I'm appalled. Not at WWA. I understand their reason for existence. It's to support climate lawsuits and to make circular claims or to falsely assume climate change is doing and then building the case. But I'm appalled that the IPCC, who has, as Chris rightly pointed out, in a lot of their science in their chapters, especially the things about extreme weather and natural disasters and things, has steadfastly clung largely to the data up until now, which people have been complaining, WWA and others have been complaining about. You're not going far enough. You're being too cautious, blah, blah, blah. I'm appalled that the IPCC would now bring these charlatans into the tent and bring further disrepute upon the body. Now, I think they can only get away with it now because the U.S. has largely withdrawn, and so we couldn't veto this kind of thing. And maybe that's a good thing. We can just start ignoring them. It's like we don't care what they say now. We know who this person is. We know what the world is doing as far as their emissions. We're not in a panic, and so their reports become irrelevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's an important point, and I actually agree. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, we could just ignore them. But yeah, I do think that this whole AR7 with him bringing in those crazies into the fold there with the attribution part of this is definitely because the U.S. involvement in it is largely now gone, and the ball's been kind of rolling on this for a long time. I talked to Dr. John Christie recently, and he was telling me a story about how Chris Landsea at the National Hurricane Center, they were back. This is back, I think, in 2001 or 2007. It was one of those two reports, and they were in a meeting, and they were talking about how hurricanes are getting worse due to global warming. They wanted to really emphasize that in the report. And Chris Landsea said, no, that my research, and he's done a lot of research on this, on hurricanes, and there was no increase. And all of a sudden, he, they said, well, no, we want the story to be increasing. Hurricanes are getting worse. And Chris Landsea got up and shouted and protested and walked out, apparently. So so when, the scientists have had their own research misrepresented by the IPCC in the past. And so if it gets, so with AR7, I imagine it's going to get a lot worse because the event attribution is far removed from the actual detection and attribution of what the IPCC standards are.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next crazy climate element. This one is actually hilarious. And, we've talked about this before. This school district, yes, it's school district week on, climate realism. This school district is now back to gas because their EV school buses can't be repaired. It's just hilarious. Let's, if we can get a look at the website for that, Linnea, I'd be greatly appreciative. But
Yep, I'm working on pulling it up.
Okay, no worries. And like I said, live television is fraught with troubles and hiccups and things like that. Here we go. It's coming up now. But here's the fun part. We've talked about this for years, about how EVs not only are not particularly efficient, because when you look at the whole carbon footprint of them, they're actually quite, carbon heavy in lots of ways, maybe more so than gas in many cases. But here we have, a whole school district investing in EV buses to, help save the planet. Well, guess what? The billions of dollars that they put into this outfit from the Biden administration, they walked away with it and went bankrupt, which we've seen before, time and again, with solar panel companies and so forth and so on. And so 159 million, I'm sorry, I said billions, 159 million, and they can't make an EV bus that's repairable. They've gone out of business. So what do? The school district has to go back to gas and diesel powered buses and buy them all over again. Yes, that's your tax dollars at work.
So they junked, the sad thing is, rather than with the experience with these technologies in the past, rather than keeping the old ones around in some kind of parking lot, they got rid of their old ones. They spent 2 to 3 times the amount of money on their EV buses as they would have spent in either maintaining their old ones or even buying new diesel. And now they're going to have to spend double the money because they ain't going to get the money back they spent on the EVs from the EV company that's gone under. It's maddening that they put green virtue signaling ahead of the safety and welfare of students and their ability to get to school in time.
You're muted there, Anthony.
He pulled a Jim.
Sorry about that. I had to mute myself. Now, in the middle of all of this technological troubles that we've had, my left hearing aid died. And I had to put a new battery in. I mean, that just goes to show you the kind of hiccups we're dealing with here, all the way from hearing aid batteries to, a website being down and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it's hilarious that they are putting, this virtue signaling well ahead of student welfare. But that's been a trend, and that's a good reason why get rid of the Department of Education, because the Department of Education has been pushing this kind of stuff for decades.
But local school districts don't have to buy into this. They only did it, I suspect, because they got some federal money to buy these buses. But regardless, they should have just said, no, you know what? We care about our kids more. The feds didn't force them to take the money, didn't force them to buy EVs. That was their virtue signaling, and that stuff needs to stop. The board needs to be replaced that made the decision. The panel of the board that made the decision to buy EVs needs to go. And all future boards and commissions need to say, we're putting the students first. We're putting their safety first. We're putting the safety of our buildings first because those things can catch on fire. We're keeping with buses that we know work and get people at places on time. Other than, anything can break down. But for a whole fleet to go under, wow.
Yeah, the whole EV bus thing it's frustrating because while EVs in terms of cars have gotten a lot better, a lot of people drive them, especially the Teslas and stuff. I'm not really convinced that our technology to have these heavy buses and other machinery, whether it's operating cranes or tractors or anything with EVs, our technology is just not there yet. And I don't know if it ever will be for stuff that's that heavy of operating machinery. And we cannot be, implementing these things, and then having this happen. So we know that the traditional, ICEs of the buses work. And so that's what we should be sticking to.
Well, and there's a ton of buses, and I've seen, like the garbage trucks and stuff. They're all on natural gas. And that seems like a fair compromise. If you want something that's not gasoline for some reason or diesel for whatever reason, the nat gas ones seem to work. All the buses at University of Wyoming were nat gas.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, if in Wyoming, I'm surprised the school buses aren't coal burners. You know, they've got so much of it.
You know
out
what?
there.
Steam? That would be the coolest thing ever. I would love that.
Steampunk bus, coal powered, with a sticker on the back. My other bus is nuclear powered.
Yeah, but even steam trains and steam ships, you still have these boats that are steam.
Yeah.
Most of them are not coal; they are diesel or some kind of marine bunker fuel powered steam.
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting thing about Wyoming and coal. Here's a sidebar. About 10 years ago, the National Center for Atmospheric Research needed a new supercomputer, you know, and this was something that was going to take up megawatts of power, you know, not just for the computer itself, but for the cooling required. And so when they ran the numbers, they discovered that, well, we can't build it in Boulder, Colorado, because it'll be too expensive to keep it running. We don't have the budget for it. So what did they do? They commissioned it to be built in Wyoming, where the electric rates are a fraction of those in blue Colorado. And so they are running all of the climate models from the National Center for Atmospheric Research on coal power because it's cheaper. Now that says something right there.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to the next crazy climate news of the week. And this one is climate change is not dooming your bananas. Yes. You know, it's pretty typical for the media to come out with some kind of an attack that says, you know, something is going to disappear because of climate change. Well, this week it's bananas. You know, other weeks it's, you know, coffee or cherries or strawberries, or reliably around Christmas time, they start talking about things like, you know, Christmas food, you know, cranberry sauce,
chocolate,
like that.
Yeah.
Anyway. So Sterling and I wrote this article about climate changes not dooming your bananas, and it's just hilarious what they go through here. These leaps and twist. Time says this: in a world that's getting warmer and more chaotic, I'll at least give them points for saying chaotic, but they're not in the way they think it is. Climate change is already threatening the future of bananas, the world's most popular fruit. Extreme weather events, shifting rainfall patterns, and rising temperatures are causing yields to fall and diseases to spread in banana growing regions from Central America to Africa to Southeast Asia. Well, the data, and we always go to the data because the data has no agenda. And as you can see in the graph down below, it does not lie. The data says something entirely different. Look at that. Banana yields are increasing globally. No end in sight.
A record high in 2023.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like an eightfold increase. I read this article like 2 days ago, and I actually put it in the monthly fact check thing that we do. But I was like, I'm sure they've increased, and sure enough, that's what the data shows, and they're actually a record high in the latest updates.
Yield increase, production increase. How it is threatening them, I don't know.
Yeah, can't see it on that graph.
Yeah, can't see it in the data, but that's why they don't spend a lot of time on these in these stories in the data. What
that's
they
bananas,
do is
man.
Anecdotal evidence. They talk to one farmer who's had a bad year. They talk to another farmer who's seeing a disease hit their crops, and they generalize that to the globe as a whole, and that which is not generalizable, and they have their narrative.
I have to wonder why.
Narrative. Climate change is causing something bad. This time it's bananas. Okay, run with it. Let's find someone who's suffering. Let's interview him. Talk about how bad it is, and how he's worried it's climate change. When they probably ask him, gee, do you think the heat here that you're suffering is climate change? Oh, yes. I've never seen it so hot before. If they hadn't mentioned it, it might not have come up. But it does. And then they've got their story.
Yeah.
Except for the little thing called facts.
Well, it's all anecdotal evidence, really.
Yeah. Well, and also, I'm sure that a lot of these farmers probably get some kickbacks if they're able to attribute their losses to climate change, right? Because that's what a lot of our, not like direct, not necessarily direct government stuff, but that's the reason why we send so much money to like climate funds in different countries, right? Like that's the whole point of that whole system is, distributing that money to people who are allegedly being hurt by it. So if they say, nah, this is just natural variability, this is what happens every year, then they're not going to get any help with repairing their banana grove or whatever for the next season. So there's a lot of incentive to say that it's climate change.
Yeah, well, in the Time editorial room, they must have been going around singing, yes, we have no bananas. We have no bananas today.
And it's
all that's how they're thinking here.
Yeah.
You have to wonder why these journalists, I mean, with this data readily available, I mean, it's on the Food and Agriculture Organization website, why they don't, or just even Our World in Data compiles it, why they don't just go and look at that.
Look, they don't employ,
they have to know. It's probably just an honest, just disingenuous. It's intentional that they.
Yeah, I mean, this is not hard work. Within a few seconds of doing Google or an AI search, you can find this stuff. It's not rocket science anymore.
Oh, I put together a chart with the data myself on Python, and I animated it. So like scrolled out, it showed the increase. I posted on Twitter.
They don't know how to use Python. When they said learn to code, none of them did.
The other thing that was
they don't have to code. They don't have to code. There's a place called the UN Food and Agriculture Organization where you can go and check the data anytime you want. It's easy. Yeah. You call it up. You go to their stat section and you put in the countries you want, you put in the crop you want, you put in what kind of production do you want, production, yield, and it spins it out for you. This is the journalism has a narrative, just like world weather attribution. They came at this, they had a story to hit. I forget whether this was an AP story or not. Remember, AP gets a lot of funding to do climate stories in developing countries. And they don't employ the fact checkers to check the facts for any of the claims made by the journalist in-house. Their editors have no oversight whatsoever, other than grammatical. Data is not important.
It was funny. Last month they had the whole vanilla ice cream is going to go extinct. It's going to go away article, and they didn't bother to read or look into the fact that like 99% of the vanilla flavoring we use is artificially created from a petroleum product. And I think it was Time. I think I could be wrong. I think it was Time Magazine or somebody that roasted that did it. And then I roasted them so bad on another topic. Time Magazine actually follows me on Twitter.
Oh my goodness!
I don't think it was.
And here's another problem. Another problem with these publications, and I've noticed this when we try to submit articles, to magazines and newspapers, and editorial websites and so forth. They have an absolute aversion to graphics. If you send them a graphic like this, they go, "Oh no, that's too hard for our readers. We can't put it in," and they will just simply remove it without any explanation because that's just too much for them.
Rather than this graphic telling 1,000 words, they say, "Oh, they can't get that."
What if you acquired a picture of a smiling child giving a thumbs up next to a banana tree? Would that be enough for them?
And they would then caption it, "This poor child who loves bananas so much is about to be killed because a flood is going to be rolling through this place any moment."
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's
all right. Speaking of animals and fruit and all this sort of stuff, this is something we covered last week. We talked about how owning a dog is now the big, no, the big no for climate change. Owning a dog, the meat-eating dog, is a thing that's contributing to the demise of the planet, and therefore you shouldn't own a dog. Yeah. So there's a cartoon that came up this week that I want to show everyone. Here it is, 101 Dalmatians version 2, the race to make dogs vegan before they destroy the planet. Get those puppies, those nasty meat eaters. So true. And you're right, Sterling. It is funny and it's sad, but true. These folks are off on a mission.
Maybe Cruella de Vil is the one that put that story out just so she could get Dalmatian owners feeling bad and giving her the down. I'll take care of them. I'll make them all vegan to make it cheaper to make her coat. I don't know.
Yeah. It just whatever. All right. So on to our main topic, the nasty fast track. That's right. The National Academy of Sciences put out a message on their website that says, oh, those terrible, incompetent climate deniers put together this secret report and made the EPA work to rescind the endangerment finding. Well, we're going to fix that, they say. We're on the fast track to review the latest evidence for whether greenhouse gas emissions endanger public health and welfare. And so basically they're going down the same channel of the people that do attribution studies. They're going to throw everything they can at this, including the kitchen sink. They're going to throw mud at the wall and see what sticks. And they've got a whole team of people working around the clock trying to put together a report that says you are wrong. The climate is being destroyed because of carbon dioxide. We're going to hell in a handbasket. Our future is doomy. And what the heck is wrong with all of you people? And it's just some of the comments that we've seen from, the usual suspects like Michael Mann and Zeke Hausfather. These scientists are supposed to be, scientists that are looking at data and facts. They've gone totally emotionally ballistic over this stuff. And they're talking about, conspiracies and, backroom deals and all this kind of stuff. They can't handle the fact that they've been refuted for the first time in in the history of climate change, successfully refuted, I might say. They've learned nothing from ClimateGate. We had one instance just this past week or so where they got some editor fired for publishing a paper about climate change that says, hey, carbon dioxide, it does some things, but it's not the big deal. There's no crisis. They got the editor fired, and they did the same thing back in ClimateGate.
Yep.
And they're just running off the rails, which is kind of what's happening entirely with the left these days. They are just running off the rails because everything that they've worked on and worked for, their whole mission is crumbling before their eyes. And they can't seem to do anything about it but flail and scream and, pound on the table and so forth. Guys, what do you think?
The DOE report put the so-called consensus community, I call them the climate change cabal or climate alarm cabal. It put them on their back feet and on the defensive for the first time in 2 decades, since they were able to start shutting climate realists, climate skeptics out of journals, since they got reporters to stop interviewing them to give an alternative point of view on climate change stories. They're now having to take the argument seriously because the people that put this together, the scientists, the DOE involved, are all respected scientists. They put together a pretty powerful report. It's got a call for public comments. The response was almost immediate, which means they saw this coming and they had their responses ready. The critiques were almost out the door before the report, the ink on the report was dry. So they didn't have time to review all the stuff. They just had their responses ready. Now, the NAS, it's interesting. I'm unaware of any instance in the past where the NAS has said we're going to spend our own money on a report that we weren't commissioned from the federal government to look at. We're going to respond to something. We want to look at the state of climate science. They're taking the National Climate Assessment as the last one as a starting point, which is, that tells you something in and of itself, since it was a badly flawed report. And they're going to rush it out the door. So it's like Andy says, look, this is the NAS's version of a rapid attribution study. It is in response to the DOE report, not in response to a need for another climate study. It's a response to undermine the DOE report and to be used to undermine the separate but related endangerment finding. It's not a coincidence. And they have to have the report done already. They know what they're going to say. they're issuing a call for you comment on what you think should be in the report. They've got a provisional committee, but they're not going to have the committee settled until like a week or week and a half before the report is due. Do you think they're going to be able to do a real comprehensive report in a week and a half of appointing the people they've on their provisional committees? Most of them, the vast majority of them, are not climate scientists. The one who's headed up is a microbiologist. What does that tell? What does a microbiologist have to inform anyone about the causes of climate change? Nothing, as far as I know. She doesn't know anything about astrophysics. She doesn't know anything about clouds, about ocean currents, about CO₂ and infrared radiation. She's a microbiologist. And most of their committee members are like that. They're in unrelated fields, but they've been in the activist community for a long time. One of them is like an admiral, a former admiral, not a climate expert, a naval man. I got nothing against the Navy. I like the Navy. But he happened to be the admiral that was pushing the hardest to take climate change seriously under various administrations.
Yeah. So AP put out a questionnaire to climate scientists around the world to get their reactions, to the EPA, the rescinding of the EPA endangerment finding. And as I pointed out, the flailing is just absolutely delicious. Some of the things that have been said in it, I'm going to read back to you. And by the way, this is by Seth Borenstein, who is the longtime climate reporter for the Associated Press. And I will point out that Seth is actually being funded by activist organizations. They have sent out money to the Associated Press to write climate change articles. This is documented. This is not speculation.
Yep.
Yeah, we've covered this. So here, the Associated Press asked 30 different scientists, experts in climate, health, and economics about the scientific reality behind this proposal. 19 of them responded, which I guess is how you get this consensus thing, right? Anyway, so here's what Zeke Hausfather said. This is the scientific equivalent to saying that smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. Yep. The relationship between CO₂ emissions and global temperature has been well established since the late 1800s, and coal burning is the single biggest driver of global CO₂ emissions, followed by oil and gas. It's utterly nonsensical to say that carbon emission from power plants do not contribute significantly to climate change. And then, of course, they had to ask, climate cheerleader Michael Mann, and he says, it's about as valid as saying that arsenic is not a dangerous substance to consume. Oh, my goodness. It's hilarious. And here's another one from Dr. Howard Frumkin, former director of the National Center for Environmental Health and a retired public health professor at the University of Washington. He says, the world is round. The sun rises in the east. Coal and gas-fired power plants contribute significantly to climate change, and climate change increases the risk of heat waves, catastrophic storms, infectious diseases, and many other health threats. These are indisputable facts. Well, we dispute them every day on climaterealism.com. Go read some of the articles where we absolutely rip these people to shreds for their claims.
I would have been a smart aleck, and I would have told that professor that actually the sun doesn't really rise in the east; the earth rotates. This is what gets me in the trouble because I'm a smart aleck.
I want to point out that they used a picture of steam coming out of power plants again for their headline picture for this article, which
up on it. Oh yeah.
Lee Zeldin pointed out on live television with them recently for I think it was CNN he was on, that he called them out for, and it was beautiful because the anchor just had nothing to say about it.
It was beautiful. It was the greatest thing I've ever seen, quite frankly.
The members of the committee, you got engineers, you got former executives at Cummins, at Chevron, neither of which was a climate, a physicist, someone who dealt with climate. It's all responses to climate change. There's a couple of them that the environmental health community, once again, potential impact of climate change, but not a cause. Nothing about understanding the causes. That's because they know the causes. The attribution is baked in. Humans are causing dangerous climate change. The only thing they're going to look at is how bad it is.
Yeah. So here's one more thing. Stanford climate scientist Chris Field, who coordinated an international report linking climate change to increasingly deadly extreme weather, summed it up this way. It is hard to imagine a decision dumber than putting the short-term interest of oil and gas companies ahead of the long-term interest of our children and grandchildren. They hit all the talking points with this article, with these interviews. It's so predictable. They say the same thing again and again. They try to guilt you into thinking, we're making a terrible future for our children. But when you go and look at the facts, hurricanes are not getting worse. Tornadoes are not getting worse. Heat waves are not getting worse. The temperature's gone up on the average in the planet a little bit, but then we've got things like UHI and poor station siting and other factors, population increases, waste energy increases, all this stuff. They completely ignore all that stuff and go straight for the jugular of, you're dooming the planet, people, stop it. You have to change your life.
We have a new Archbishop of Ranterbury. I nominate Anthony Watts. They ignore even more important facts than what you described, Anthony. They say to profit oil companies. I'm sorry, oil companies profit from the development and sale of oil and gas or coal. They do. There's no question about it. So do all the stockholders that invest in it. They benefit. You know who else benefits from that work? Everybody on earth. Anyone who eats any food today, anyone who has lights and electricity, who has refrigeration, who goes to the hospital and has plastics and technology, medicines, every farmer, everybody who shops at grocery stores or for clothing, we all benefit from fossil fuels. And that's what they ignore. Lifespans are longer because of fossil fuels. Health is better because of fossil fuels. They ignore the fact that aside from a few companies making profits, we all benefit from these things. 6,000 products, the computer I'm sitting in front of right now with its camera, all the plastic, all the wiring that's covered, it's fossil fuels, folks.
iPhones.
The coffee that I'm drinking, the beans, fossil fuels, folks. The ceramics that were made using, heated in kilns, probably fossil fuels, folks.
There might actually be fossil fuels in the liquid in this, in energy drinks. I'm actually not really sure.
Well, I hear dinosaurs can be really stimulating.
Yeah. That's how it gives you energy.
I got a plastic cup here.
Yeah, there's a couple of websites out there that talk about all the things that are being made from, fossil fuel products, oil and gas. And the list is staggering. I mean, if we were to stop using all oil and gas today, modern society would completely grind to a halt. Completely. There would be
millions of people would die from the spoilage of food.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. What do you got there, Linnea?
I have a little drop of oil that a friend of my parents gave me, but I actually have. This is the first pay zone that I ever got when I was working as when I was working on offshore drill ships. So I have a little vial of it. It used to glow under black light, but it doesn't anymore. Not sure why. I couldn't tell you, but yeah, I collect that.
When people say drill, baby, drill, they're talking about Linnea. All right. Before we get into our Q&A, I want to talk about our sponsor a little bit. Let me find it here. Okay. So we have a sponsor for Climate Realism. And the reason we have a sponsor is because, Google shut us down. We're not allowed to make money because we're evil climate deniers. So they took down our advertising. But we do have a sponsor. We'd like to encourage you to visit our sponsor. For decades, I've been immersed in data And one of the clearest trends has nothing to do with temperature. It's the relentless decline of our purchasing power. Since we severed the dollar's last link to gold in 1971, we've lost 87% of our purchasing power on the American dollar. This is not theory, it's fact. And it's driven by the Federal Reserve and their freedom to expand money basically by printing more of it. Today, we hear the lunatic left proposing, saying trillions more are needed from private investment to push net zero policies. You know, they're just throwing money at the problem, good money after bad, so to speak. And there's a direct parallel going on here. The same kind of flawed thinking that produces unreliable climate models and claims from those is behind the monetary policies that erode your wealth. When you see how wrong they are on the science, you should have zero confidence in their ability to drive an economy, which is usually as effective as wishing for unicorns and rainbows to appear. And this is why I've always been a proponent of hard assets and hard data. And that's why I'm thrilled to announce that we're partnering with Advisor Metals. They don't offer theories. They offer real-world solutions for our viewers. They provide a pathway to convert our depreciating paper assets into gold and silver, which have been serving a reliable store for millennia. So it's a decision based on historical data, not political fiction, to protect yourself from this ongoing trend. Please visit our sponsor. And you can find them by going to climaterealismshow.com/Advisor Metals, or just simply look up Advisor Metals on Google. It's that easy. We thank them for sponsoring us. All right, it's time for Q&A.
Do I have to?
Whatever you want to do, Linnea.
Do I have to press the intro?
Deal.
Okay, I'll do it.
All right.
For the audience, I know they like it. All right. Okay, guys, Q&A here. I am going to take down this screen. And, well, I guess this format works fine for this. I don't know. I don't remember what format Andy usually uses when we're doing this. I think we have let me look for a second and see if we have a little screen or like a graphic to bring up on. No? Okay, never mind. Anyway, we don't have a whole lot of questions today. However, we have good ones for the ones that we do have. So this question from Rick Bear is, why is an economic forum and not an environmental forum the main agent for net zero, or nut zero, as Rick
I like to think of it as like Russian net zero.
Yeah. Well, why is WEF the one that's like pushing this harder than anyone else?
Well, because it's really all, it's not about science. Remember, they've already concluded humans are causing climate change. And the question is, how do we get there to net zero economically? That's why they're driving everything. But also, they're driving everything because they want to be in the driver's seat. They're going to be the ones that benefit from the policies put in place, from forcing people to end their extravagant lifestyles while they still jet around in private jets, right? They're not giving up anything. They want you to give up your life. And so the World Economic Forum is in the driver's seat. The science is settled. We've been told that for 3 decades now. So now it's time to move on to the policies, and the policies are WEF. By the way, Linnea put in her plug for her oil. This is my shale rock that was given to me when I gave a presentation at the Society for Independent Professional Earth Scientists. So
that's awesome.
You got your drop of oil. I got my shale rock.
Well, since we're talking about stuff on our shelf, I don't have any rocks or oil.
We're doing rock collection showing on the Climate Realism Show.
But I do have my favorite artifact from the space age, and it is made from oil because it's plastic. This is the famous control switch from Apollo 12 in the command module. This is the famous SCE to aux switch, and I don't know if any of you know that story or not, but the Apollo 12 spacecraft was hit by lightning shortly after takeoff. Everything went dark, scrambled data. They were looking to abort the mission, and they were going to have to, use the launch escape tower to pull the astronauts away from the rocket. And Chris, the controller, Kranz, not Chris, but Kranz, the guy who was the controller, he's at a loss. Anyway, this other guy, controller named John Aaron, who had seen this problem once before with this scrambled data, remembered it in the back of his head and knew exactly what to do. And he says, flight, try SCE to aux. And the flight goes, what? What's that? And then repeat SCE to aux. And then Alan Bean in the command module remembered he'd seen this switch. And he goes, I know what it is. And he's flipped it. And all of a sudden, the data came back and the mission was saved. It was one of the greatest engineering triumphs in the history of the space program. And it's, I've seen people with license plates that say SCE to aux. Anyway, that's my contribution.
Awesome. I love show and tell. We should have that as a, as a regular part. And Chris has donned the cowboy hat. I am not going to get up to get my cowboy hat, but we are going to move on to the next question. This is from Chris Nisbet, who is a regular viewer of ours. IPCC is more of a political body than a scientific one, right? At this point.
It will be now.
Yeah.
AR7 for sure.
No, it has been from the start. Remember, it was formed by a international body of governments, the UN. It was given a charge to study the human causes of climate change, not to study climate change, to study the human causes of climate change. It is the executive summaries are all reviewed by governments, rewritten by governments, and often don't reflect what's in the body of the document. So from its inception, the IPCC was a political body with some scientists working on it. And if he's got glasses, I'm going to put on mine from the from the Williamsburg. It's the Colonial.
Do you have any? Are those rose-colored glasses?
They're not. They're tinted blue-colored glasses. This is the kind of glasses they had.
I was going to make a rose-colored glasses joke. Darn it!
That's when you were with the Blue Man Group, right?
Yeah.
Oh, hey man, chill out.
All right.
Tune in.
See, this is what happens when Jim leaves. This show just like falls apart. We become totally nuts. All right. So Don Hughes says finding the data, and I think this is in regards to FAO data and other data, might be easy to find, but is it accurate?
What data specifically? I'm guessing climate data.
I think this was about crop production data.
They're generally pretty accurate.
Don can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong.
Well, it's as accurate as it can be. It's the data comes from governments, reported to the UN. They do some independent research, but the USDA collects its data. For some countries where the governments aren't very good at tracking data, or where there's strife, political strife, wars, sometimes it's hard for a year to capture data, but they do their best. The thing is, I guess in some sense, there's no way to test whether the data is accurate. We have to work with the data that we have, and the UNFAO seems to be about as good a data as you can get.
Yeah.
On crops. I don't know if that's what he was talking about, though.
Alrighty. So here's a question from Ed Reed, who says, after you consume all of the rare earth minerals to achieve net zero, where do you get the rare earth minerals for the solar and wind equipment replacements?
Well, that's where the unicorns and rainbows come in.
You've got leprechauns.
Yeah, Chris is right. It's leprechaun science.
No, you only get gold from leprechauns, and then only if you catch them and force them to tell you where their pot is.
Yeah, and Ed makes a good point. There's been studies that show that there's, first of all, not enough fossil fuel available on the planet to be able to burn to produce the worst scenario out of our CP 8.5 climate model. Just can't happen. And there was actually a paper about that back in 2019, 2020. But at the same time, there are not enough rare earth minerals in the planet's crust for us to be able to manufacture enough to be able to achieve net zero. So, It's rainbows and unicorns, no matter how you look at it.
But that's assuming that's really what they want. What they want is us to live like in the 1840s, because that's what it is going back to where they want us to go back to emissions wise, is when the world was in the early 1800s. We didn't have indoor plumbing. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have all sorts of things. But that gets us to net zero. That's really the only thing that does it. The other, the renewables and all that stuff, that's just window dressing to say, oh no, we're not going to destroy your life. We've got this other energy source, an energy source that won't work, an energy source that wants is a net zero, but they're taking you along the path until they get you to where it's like, well, yeah, like France. France says, no, we can't have more air conditioners, even though air conditioning saves lives, according to studies. According to international studies, air conditioning saves lives. France, well, we can't have that. We got to let people keep suffering. And then we'll blame climate change for their suffering.
Yeah, but Sterling, Elon Musk says that you can power the entire planet by solar panels and batteries because you can power a satellite with solar panels and batteries. And that's the same thing, right?
Yeah, a single satellite is almost the same thing as powering the entire planet. You're right. My mistake. Who am I to ever question anything Elon Musk ever says?
Stan Pickett asks, did Heartland submit comments to the endangerment finding comment page? I think we're working on that project at the moment. Are we not?
What's that?
Did the question from Stan Pickett?
I just finished submitting comments on what the NAS should be looking at. Different of these things have different deadlines. Tuesday is the comment period for the NAS report. We'll be submitting comments on that. I'm working on that after I get off the show today and over the weekend, and it's due Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. Then we're commenting on the NAS, who the NAS should have as members of the committee looking at the climate report. And then after that, I think it's September 22nd or the 29th, that's when the comments are due on the endangerment finding. And we're submitting comments on all four of those things.
Awesome. All right. Lightning round here. This is for you, Anthony, from Jerry, who says, how much longer will What's Up With That be down? I'm jonesing for a reality fix.
Well, as I pointed out earlier, we have 18 years worth of content that we have to migrate to the new setup. That is 35,000 posts and over 4 million comments. It's like an 18-year-long freight train that we're trying to move. And things just don't go quickly with that. And we had thought we would be done by now. We just put up a new update page on the site. We really can't bring it back until we're done, because if we do, all the work that we've done just goes down the toilet. So look at it this way. We have a great holiday weekend coming up. And so while I would love to have you visiting What's Up With That, why don't you do something even better for the planet? Go out and burn some charcoal, fry some steaks, and, smoke a cigar and have a glass of whiskey at the end, to celebrate our independence and how labor has, produced an abundance on our planet, and just enjoy life. And hopefully on Tuesday morning, we'll be back.
I'm very concerned that you've got a camera in my outdoor patio section, Anthony, since you just described what my normal weekend looks like.
No. You're just predictable, Sterling.
Well, that's probably true. Yeah.
Chris, what have you got going on for Labor Day weekend?
I was actually going to go back up to Pennsylvania to visit some of my old college buddies, because they're all saying it's not the same at Millersville without me. Like, I've had like 15 people texting me saying that they're bored to tears. And I'm probably going to go because the flights were expensive out of where I'm at. And so I might go visit one of my other friends over in another state next to me.
Boredom is caused by climate change, Chris.
Oh, I know. That was Michael Mann said that on Twitter, like yesterday. Boredom's caused by climate change. And I think Michael Mann's right. He's the leading expert.
All right. This question by Fighting Zenithian, who says, is there any truth to climate alarmists taking money from the Chinese Communist Party, Putin's rulership, and possibly even Nicolas Maduro's corrupt government? I'd say yes to all of the above, but not directly. Not like, they're not getting a check signed by Maduro in the mail saying, please lie about climate or whatever. They're just, there's a bazillion different NGOs that filter that stuff.
Well, we looked at in the past, we found where Russia was funding anti-fracking propaganda. They were funding groups offshore that were then bringing money onshore to do anti-fracking protests and to write articles and things. I can't speak to the Chinese Communist Party and Nicolas Maduro. Look, that guy's so incompetent right now. He's scrambling to avoid a $50 million bounty on his head. So I don't know how much he's funding anything right now.
And Jerry Palmer asks, did you get the ransom note for Andy yet? How much does Nye want to release him?
Well, I wouldn't put it past Bill Nye, but I'll be honest, we don't know what's going on, and we're concerned for Andy, and we hope that he's okay. It could just be a technological glitch. He may just be, unable to communicate with us because he's in an internet black hole of some kind.
Alrighty, you guys. I think that's all we've got.
Okay. Well, I want to thank our streaming partners who have been helping us out get the word out. And that includes junkscience.com, cfact.com, the CO₂ Coalition, Climate Depot, and of course my website, What's Up With That, which is currently down, but hopefully we'll be back up soon once we get the move done. Oh, and then there's also Heartland UK Europe, who is making great strides in pushing climate realism in the EU. I want to thank our guest, Chris Martz, and both Linnea, who actually did triple duty this show as guest or commentator and producer, and also question wrangler. So thank you, Linnea, and thank you, Sterling, for your help and commentary. I want to remind you to go to heartland.org. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Visit climateataglance.com, which we're going to have a new book out on that very soon, so stay tuned for that. Climateataglance.com to get factual rebuttals to all kinds of climate questions, as well as climaterealism.com, where daily we take claims from the media and shoot them down from the sky. That's it for this show. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow for Environment and Climate at the Heartland Institute, wishing you a great day and a fantastic holiday weekend. Bye-bye.